Hi everyone, and welcome to another edition of Code Remix Weekly. As always, I'm your co-host, Tim Spick. With me on the call is Dan Steiner.
Hello, everyone.
Now, the topic that we're going to dive into more detail today is automating your impact analysis. But as become tradition, we'll first take you through some of the things that are new this past week to show you all that's going on in the world of open and Android. And for that, I'm going to share some tabs. And the very first one you can see is that Jonathan has been a guest on another edition of the Airhacks Advent podcast. So if you want to learn more about transforming Java code at scale with OpenRewrite, you can listen to that podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, and just listen to another pleasant edition of just both NMG and Jonathan Steiner on transforming Java code at scale. So another thing that is interesting is that we are working on some new stuff, and we'll go into more detail later. But it is very exciting stuff if you've been using OpenRewrite a while, and you might be interested to have a look at this particular PR, where we introduce a new concept called traits, which is inspired by work done previously on rewrite analysis by our good friend Jonathan Lightshoe. But we're pulling over some of the elements to OpenRewrite itself. And there, it will help you be more expressive in the way that you write your recipes. And you can already see some hints of that being applied left and right throughout OpenRewrite itself, and also for Spring Beans in particular. So know that is coming. And the first place you are going to hear about it probably is going to be in a next release. So when I told you we did a release last week, we're now also putting out a short summary on Twitter, or formerly known as Twitter, now X. So if you want to be up to date or whenever we do a new release, then that is a great place to follow us and see exactly what we added in the past couple of weeks and what you can then look forward to using on your own code as well. So then also new this week is that we did a new blog based on a conversation we had in this very space with a open source contributor, Shannon Puggrove. And if you want to read back on exactly what we did discuss in that call, then there's a blog which is a very nice write-up of all the things we went over on that particular call. So understanding the OpenRewrite data model, the best ways to improve, your favorite tips for recipe authoring, future flag challenges, and how to join the community effort. So have a look at that one. Of course, if you saw the episode, this would be more of a refresher. But it is, if it's your preferred medium to read over things, then this is a great way to do so. Now, also new this week is that we are now up to over 2,600 individual recipes. So you might recall that 6 weeks ago, we celebrated having 2,500 recipes. And then somewhere earlier this week, Sam managed to take a screenshot over 2,600 recipes. And already we have 19 additional recipes. So it's really ramping up rather quickly. In large part, I think, helped by the recipes we have to now migrate from Java util logging to SLF4J. And just we'll keep adding recipes to that collection as we and our fellow contributors to the project add new recipes to help you move in there. So that's most of the updates. And then finally, the last time we'll mention it is that we're going to be at UberConf next week, where there will be 4 different sessions where you can see all of us present. And myself, I'll be in Berlin for We Are Developers Rules Congress with just a single session, because I'll be there by myself. But those are all the things that are new this week. And then I'd like to open the floor up for Sam to look at how we can go about automating impact analysis.
Yeah. And as you were talking about being at the conference next week, I just realized that in UberX in particular, I'm going to be at the UberX conference now instead of Olga. So I'll be there this time next week on Wednesday. So you might have different hosts for next week's office hours than we do today. So we'll figure something out, though.
I'll be out as well. So it'll be someone else co-hosting with someone else.
Yeah, it'll be a good time though. I might still be able to just call in remotely from the conference. We'll see. Uh, so yeah, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about how you can use recipes to do impact analysis. One thing that is a frequent aspect of software engineering is you are considering some change, whether you are adding new functionality or fixing a bug or just asking the question, what if I adjusted this lever? What if things worked a little bit differently than they do? What would the consequences of that change be? And sometimes you can choose to maybe live dangerously and find out what's going to break by making the change and then seeing who comes and yells at you. That's certainly one strategy that I've occasionally employed professionally for things where I'm like, this is low risk. Probably nobody uses this, and if they do, they're not going to be too mad at me if I break this. But there are many situations where such a cavalier attitude towards breaking your colleague's code might have personal or professional ramifications, let's say, and you want to be a bit more rigorous about it. And that is where being able to run recipes over many different repositories can be really handy. So today I was gonna highlight some recipes that can easily be run with the Moderne SaaS or CLI, and also with the build plugins, but maybe a little bit more cumbersomely since they are kind of inherently single project, about how you could look up and start to reason about the impact of changes you were considering to public APIs that you maintain that might be used by other people within your organization, or perhaps in the open source world if you publish libraries in the open source ecosystem, as we here at Moderne do via Open Rewrite. So let's see, I'll just share my screen. So over here I have open the Moderne SaaS, and I do most of my work in the Open Rewrite organization, and every now and then I will be considering what might happen if I change some piece of code, right, in a way that might be breaking. What if I'm looking at an overload of a method like, I don't know, listutils.map, and thinking about adding or removing an argument that already exists, and I want to go find out who uses this method? Does anyone use this method? If I delete it entirely, is anyone going to be bothered? If I change a signature in a breaking way, what will be affected? And so for that sort of question, I find it very handy to be able to run the find method usages, recipe, which accepts a method pattern, which is a way of specifying or somewhat uniquely identifying a method on a particular class. And these are documented in more detail under docs.moderne.io. So if you want to learn about all of the features of method patterns, which feature prominently in recipes that search or manipulate Java, this is a good document to familiarize yourself with. It's just under this reference section and method patterns. But the basic gist of it is you type the fully qualified name of the class the method is declared on. So the first time you see one of these, you might interpret this as the return type of the method, but it is not. It is the class the method is declared on. So I want to, search for like this listutils.map. So I'm going to type in the fully qualified name of listutils. And then a space between the class it's declared on, the name of the method, and you can put the types of the parameters here, or do what I'm doing, and these two dots indicate a wildcard. So parameters of any type. And let's say, I'll match on overrides. This is a utilities class, so there aren't any particular overrides of the class, but let's say there were. And so immediately I start getting back results across all of our various repositories. I went and ran this on the Open Rewrite org, where I expect there to be usages of Open Rewrite APIs like listutils, and I can go through and see the places in code where this method is used and evaluate. Oh, maybe I don't want to mess with this Maybe I don't want to mess with this method too much if it means that I'm going to have to, break or make changes in 200 places or so. Or maybe I reason at that point, well, if I'm going to change this, it could be sensible to create an automated refactoring recipe in order to update all of these code locations accordingly. And so doing this kind of search when you're in that design or experimentation phase with a particular code change can help you to find out uh, the scale of the impact that change will have. And if I got back, 0 results here, I might just delete the method outright. If I got back 5 or 10, uh, yeah, good point, Kevin, in the chat, who had a useful tip on constructing these method patterns. Whoops, didn't mean to replace that part. But this little magic wand will prompt you for the fully, each of the individual components of the method pattern. But I wanted to make sure to take a second to explain how it worked. Anyway, as when you were, using one of these in code, you will not necessarily have a handy magic wand button to click. And when you are authoring Java recipes or the like, you may have to look that up. There isn't necessarily IDE support for that. Oh, who knows? Maybe we could add IDE support for filling in method patterns as part of the Moderne IDE plugin at some point. Anyway, if I go back to the recipe results from running that, yeah, so if I'd gotten no results, then I could probably safely delete the method or make whatever breaking change I felt like without being terribly worried about the consequences. And if I got just 5 or 10 results, I might say, well, I'll just go update those manually, or maybe just tell the people on the teams who use that code that a breaking change is coming, could notify them appropriately, promise to make it up to them later that I've broken their code, and thereby preserve my interpersonal relationships with my colleagues and avoid my excellent engineering decisions causing other problems for me. And then if, in this case, I start to see hundreds or potentially thousands of changes, well, then I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to make a breaking change to this one, maybe I just don't. Maybe I don't make a breaking change to this thing. It's not worth it. I'll find another way to solve the problem. But if I really want to make a breaking change to something where there are hundreds or thousands or potentially more instances of its usage, well, then it's recipe time, right? Then it's time to create a recipe that will help to uh, mitigate the damage that I would inflict upon my colleagues in the organization by doing an update. Uh, so yeah, and so that's if you're considering changing a method, you can use the find method usages. But sometimes you're considering making a different kind of change. Maybe you want to change make some like rename a class or make some change that isn't to a particular method but is to a class level sort of thing. And for that, there is the kind of more general find types recipe, where I could just search for just the fully qualified name of the class, or in this case, we'll stick with our list utils example. And if I run this will find just all the places that any part of the class is used. And so this is a recipe that I will use both for impact analysis and when I'm learning a new API and I want to say answer for myself, how is this thing used? How do I'm trying out something in Spring, something in Micronaut, something from some library that I haven't already learned everything about and internalized all of the relevant details from. Documentation is good and great, and talking with experts on it can help a lot. There are many ways to learn, but one of the best ways to learn how code works, in my experience, is to see it used to solve real problems in its most appropriate context. So I will frequently, look up some type, look up a class, look up a method from a class across, a subset or even potentially all of the, well, we're almost up to 40,000 projects ingested in here to go find examples of how to use it. And, can go run the tests and the like from there. Okay, so let's see. Further on the subject of analyzing breaking changes, another kind of change that happens, frequently enough that it is worth discussing independently is updating dependencies, right? Because when you update the versions of dependency that your project takes, that can affect the versions of dependencies resolved in all downstream downstream repositories. If I maintain rewrite core and I want to, I don't know, bump the version, say, of like OK HTTP that is used, noting like this issue that, hey, this is pinned back to this older version for a reason, but maybe I'm wondering, that comment was made. Actually, I don't know how long ago this comment was made, but let's take a look. This comment was made in 2022. This comment was made, 2 years ago, maybe more in some cases. Is it still relevant today? Is there a reason to keep this version pinned, or any of the, many other reasons that a dependency update might happen, to address a CVE or a potential security issue? And whatever it is, if I update this dependency here, that potentially impacts all of my downstream consumers of this project. So as I'm considering, can I upgrade a dependency? Well, I might want to go check across all of the repositories that, consume my current library, what versions of this dependency are already in use there. And so there's a recipe that we call, well, there's kind of three recipes: Maven Dependency Insight, Gradle Dependency Insight, and the one I'm going to use, Dependency Insight for Gradle and Maven, which combines their various functionalities into one. And so I want to see what version of, OKHTTP ends up in use. Oh, thanks for the link. What version of OKHTTP ends up in use across all of these repositories, so that I can evaluate, like, what is it gonna change if I bump this version, right? Because it's entirely possible that, due to how dependency version resolution works in Gradle and Maven and other tools, that they're already using a newer or different version than what I provide here, in which case it's kind of no big deal if I change it. It would almost be recognizing a de facto reality that if all of my library's consumers were using a newer version of this dependency than I am, then it would kind of obviously be okay to update it. So, I can tell from running this recipe already that only these 4 repositories are directly using, this kind of functionality. And I can even see, what versions they're using in these results. But if I don't want to like click through all of the results individually to check, and we already see here that, I'm actually having a different version in rewrite core being resolved 4.9.3 than we saw over here, and I want to say rewrite Kotlin, where we're getting 4.12.0. And so there's might already be a spread of different versions of this dependency in use above and beyond, or with greater variation than I might have imagined, which particularly for, uh, some dependencies are bundled together, like Jackson or Open Rewrite or Spring dependencies, and having variations in what versions of them are in play could itself be a problem. So there's this visualization that's built on top of this data, which produces a violin chart. The name of this data visualization, you can maybe infer how it got the name just from looking at that, as it makes these kind of curvy violin like shapes. Reflects that of the projects I ran this on, a majority of them are using this 4.12.0 version. Just 2 of them are using 4.11.0, and 3 of them are still on 4.9.3. So, this tells me that if I were going to, upgrade the version that is in use here, 4.9.3, to, 4.12.0, well, most of my consumers are actually already on that version, right? So it's very unlikely that this would be a breaking change for them or present them any, sort of difficulty or challenges to accept.
And
So
what I like about this type of insight is that the moment that you want to urgently know what version you are on, you can
right.
also generate this very, very quickly.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. In this case, it's there's no operational problem that we're having or have been reported to us that hinges upon this particular dependency. So whether I choose to bump this up or leave it alone is not a pressing issue at the moment. But it very easily could be. If a high severity CVE came out that was like, oh my God, 4.9.3 has some terrible bug. It doesn't, or at least not that I've heard. I'm not trying to like
Mhm.
break any news here. Don't quote tweet me. Uh, but if I did have some urgent reason to upgrade this, I could go and we're like, oh my God, what's our exposure to this issue? We use, oh no, we have some usage of this, this old version. You go look at this and be like, oh, okay, most of our stuff is actually already on the newer version, with the fix, whatever that may be. And so that already might like, immediately before any action is taken, maybe dial down a little bit of the stress or uncertainty that can be
Mhm.
involved in
Yeah.
those panicky early moments of going from uh, blissful ignorance to realizing that there is a serious problem that needs some form of remediation. That this could maybe dial down the panic. Or it might show you that the panic is entirely justified and you need to
Yes.
to urgently act across all of your repositories.
This is the moment you realize that you either can go back to sleep or can wake up a couple more colleagues if something really is
Exactly,
happening.
exactly. That's an excellent point, Tim. Yeah, when you're on call and you're being woken up bleary eyed at 2 in the morning, it might be nice to be able to quickly prove to yourself or others that no, it's actually okay if you go back to sleep and handle this in the morning, or to know with confidence that, oh no, this actually is an emergency waking up for right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I also like about this type of visualization is you can see it in the preview. We can also do this across different modules or versions. So I share the link
Yeah.
with you privately. We can also do this for maybe any Jackson dependency.
Yeah, so I'd alluded earlier to how you can check the alignment of related modules that are published together. So I've just gone and run this recipe again, saying the Jackson group ID, the group ID, and any artifact ID under that group ID for the popular JVM serialization library. And it has splits, as many libraries do, its functionality into different submodules so that you can pick and choose just the ones that are relevant to you and keep a class path that is lean and mean and doesn't have any bloat or glut in it. Now the challenge with that is that all of these modules that are versioned together are built and tested together, and indeed no guarantee is made by anyone that it works at all for any purpose if you're using one version of Jackson Core and a different version of Jackson Databind. Oh. Oh wait, this is still the OKHTTP. I thought I went and ran. I must have been. Did I not go run?
I also share the link with you if you want to
Oh yeah,
directly open that
thanks.
one.
Excellent. Thanks, Tim, for running this in the background, as I apparently cannot talk about Jackson and type it at the same time. So this is the violin chart like we just saw, but expanded to show all the different Jackson modules, at least all the ones that were found to be in use. And with all of these repositories that we ran it on and Open Rewrite being versioned together and used together, if everything was ideal, we would expect all of the versions of Jackson to be the same for all of these modules across all of these different projects. So the fact that we, oops, zoomed in further than I meant to. There we go, auto scale button to the rescue. So the fact that I see this distribution of these different versions of these different modules says that maybe this is something worth addressing, that I should use perhaps one of our dependency management recipes to try to upgrade the versions of Jackson in use across all of our repositories so that they are all aligned on a very recent version. uh, Again, this isn't causing any operational problems for us right at the moment, but this is one of those things that this is maybe a sign of like things are fine until they aren't, right? You know, the next, as soon as something bumps up to Jackson 2.18.0, one of these repositories on an old left behind version that was fine yesterday might break today. And so part of uh, it's also a kind of impact analysis to consider your exposure or risk level to changes that you're not actively making or you're not necessarily even planning, but that are likely to happen, right? Like a new version of Jackson is going to come out at some point. Open rewrite modules will begin to adopt that version, and either because they have a dynamic version constraint on like latest.release, or because someone with all the best intentions in the world goes and updates that version, and then at that time, this spread of versions, which is currently asymptomatic, you might say, might suddenly become quite problematic and cause an operational problem. And then change lists are getting reverted and long Slack threads are starting. And there's just a general bit of just a little bit more chaos in the workday and in the development process than there necessarily needs to be if you kind of keep an eye out for this stuff and kind of proactively resolve these simmering or potential problems in your code base, which is something that I see real potential for automation to help with in the day-to-day life of a software engineer is try to shift problems from being reactive, things that happen to you, to proactive, do something about it before it actually blows up. And then you can enjoy, hopefully more low stress, blissful days where nothing is exploding or on fire and things are mostly working as intended. Uh, yeah. So
And it's also a great thing to dry run on a Tuesday morning, such that you're ready to do it on a Sunday evening. It's,
yeah, totally. Yeah, and so for something like this, you could, if we wanted to be proactive about this, you know, there are, recipes for doing. Where'd they go? Yeah, upgrade Gradle and Maven dependency versions, which could help and be a starting point for going and trying to upgrade Jackson or OKHTTP or whatever it is across all of my libraries. And now even because I've conducted the impact analysis, I've seen what spread of versions and what modules are in use for Jackson. I have a sense of even before I would run a recipe like this or do anything with the results, I have a sense of how likely that is to be a big problem, right? I would see that like minor versions and patch versions are being bumped in this case, so maybe not super likely to cause problems, but there's some non-zero probability there. So I could go into an upgrade operation like this with eyes wide open, rather than just being like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to upgrade it and see what breaks. So yeah, those are a couple ways that I use impact analysis type recipes on the regular during software development to minimize the impact of breakages or even potential breakages both on myself and my colleagues, and of course people in our open source ecosystem who are consumers of these libraries. How about you, Tim? What kind of do you find yourself doing much impact analysis type stuff in your day-to-day work?
yeah, I've done similar work when I worked on Apache Maven, where you kind of want to find not just a particular method, but maybe all the string utilities methods, and
Yeah.
then rather than visualize the results, just export them to a data table and maybe group them
Ah.
there and sort them by how many counts do we have of a particular instance. From there, prioritize the work that, where you maybe lack coverage with recipes to then fill out those recipes and have the biggest impact in the changes that you're making.
Yeah, yeah, excellent point that these recipes can produce data tables. And I know that the open source Maven plugin now produces data tables. I'm not sure if we've gone and added that to the Gradle plugin or not. But either way, after seeing
Not
the
yet.
visualization and getting a sense of, at a glance, what is my spread of versions like, I can also then come here to the data table and see the exact versions of every individual Jackson, dependency that were found across, all of the direct and transitive dependencies of all of these different projects. So that can
Yeah,
be
yeah.
that can be helpful. Although I'm noticing looking
No,
at this, it seems like we have some duplicate rows in here for this data table, which is maybe not harmful, but a bit of a waste. I may have to go back to this back to this recipe and make sure that it isn't emitting the same row more than once, because
but but
redundant
it
information.
is on a certain depth, right? So it's coming into multiple paths in a
Yeah,
tree
and
structure.
yeah, and you can't see it. Some of this is multiple paths to the same dependency. And it's just like in this particular case, this depth field shows how deep in the dependency tree the particular dependency was found. So some of it is that we're finding multiple different things. In this case, direct. Well, I mean these ones are duplicates, but um, that we might find multiple different paths to, Jackson data bind, which here exists at depth 4, and maybe somewhere else exists at a different depth. And
Hmm.
here's Jackson data bind at depth 3 on the same repository. So some of this apparent duplication is the same dependency showing up in different places in the transitive dependency graph. And of course, Gradle or Maven or your build tool of choice will do some form of conflict resolution. So you end up with just one version on the class path at the end, um, which is reflected here with the version number being the same everywhere, even in the apparent duplicates. But yeah, that is dependencies end up being complex. Dependency resolution is a complex topic, and when it goes wrong, it can be a real pain to debug. Oh.
And it's
So
these are very targeted. You know what you're going to be looking for types of analysis. But of
yeah,
course, we can also start to track these over time, which you make it part of something that you maybe are interested in on the regular. And then, of course, we have the Dev Center where you can make it part of something that you track repeat on a schedule in such a way that, in this case, you can find exactly which Java versions or Maven plugin parent version or shared component dependencies you're using.
mhm.
And one I like in particular is analyzing the parent forms. If you have a suite of projects and you want to know which versions of the parents they are using, because that would influence which plugins you're using and all of that, then we have a recipe and a combined visualization that gives you that insight. And it's fairly very quick.
Yeah, good call
So,
to show this up. I tend to think if most of our projects use Gradle, and even though we maintain a Maven plugin, I mostly think about dependencies and building of projects in Gradle terms. But if you're in a Maven environment, what parent POM you're using and the version of that parent POM is tends to be very relevant, particularly if you're doing an org-wide upgrade of like, okay, everyone needs to get on the new version of Jackson or internal company core lib or whatever it is, and the full spread of versions you have in use for parent POMs can be uh, quite important for that.
yeah, yeah, because quite often you see it in Maven shops that they'll have some shared parents that every project extends, and then that's something that you want to have this custom analysis option for beyond just what you would otherwise do for maybe Spring parent versions or something.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's one I quite like. And then quite recently, we added a page to the docs, which I'll also share in the chat here and present as well, which is a page showing you all the individual recipes that we have that produce data tables. And quite frequently, these are paired together with a visualization that will take that data and present it in such a way that it's more easy to, at a glance, distill some information from it. If you want to do an impact analysis, this is a list of, I think, some 30 individual recipes that you can run to really help you do this type of analysis and run it at scale.
Yeah, so be thinking
Share that.
about what kind of questions you sometimes have that you may wish to address to your entire code base. Whenever you find yourself asking a question with no locality to the code you're working on, or that you don't know where you might find all of the answers, or that just affects that up front affects many different pieces of code, consider how you could use a recipe to find, aggregate, uh, find and aggregate the information that's relevant to your question, and consider producing a data table for it, or a recipe that puts in search result markers, or both. You can do both in the same recipe, and make whatever tool will answer your question. I was talking with an engineer at one of our customers recently, who was working with some Spring applications that he wasn't familiar with. There were old legacy Spring applications that had been made by people who were not at the company anymore. Who he didn't have anyone who knew the code better than him to ask questions about it. But he was now found himself to be responsible for this code, and so he wrote a recipe that produced UML diagrams of the applications in questions, and of how the different Spring components related to and used each other, and mostly found that it was a bit of a rat's nest, with a lot of arrows going into and out of the same component, which one of his colleagues humorously dubbed the single point of failure service.
Hmm.
Which already taught him something about the operational and maintenance characteristics of this code, that he found himself in the position of owning. And so that I really I liked the ingenuity there of coming up with it, and then it showed maybe kind of a common pattern of producing the data visualization, and he kind of at a glance got a sense of the complexity and interconnectedness of this application, but then also found the visual, like, beyond kind of getting that first impression, the visual was kind of overwhelming and not that useful, because real world software can be so complex that you just have so many arrows and boxes going everywhere, that the visualization isn't the yeah, it can be hard to use for that deeper analysis. So he found himself, he would look at the visualization to, like, get a bird's eye view, and then actually did most of the analysis beyond that point in the data table, in the spreadsheet, that backed the visualization, where he could see it all written out in
Hmm.
great detail.
Yeah, I remember on some of the projects I worked on, the easiest way to get some kind of priority for the cleaning out some technical debt that you have is just to
Mm.
visualize it and present that visualization. And if it looks like a ball of mud, and it is an accurate representation of your code, then maybe it's easier to convince folks that you should put some effort into resolving and unwinding that
That's
ball of mud.
that's an excellent point, Tim. I've noticed multiple times throughout my career, people with engineers with all of the best intentions, trying to do the right thing by a code base, sometimes struggling to get buy-in from management or even their peers that a particular refactoring or maintenance activity is necessary or desirable, or worth the cost, and it can kind of come down to a bit of a he said she said sort of situation, where a manager's like, okay, you're telling me this is an issue, but, like, your colleague doesn't necessarily believe it's as important as you are. I'm going to split the
Hmm.
difference, and we're going to work on this feature that the business needs,
Yeah.
instead of this maintenance activity that you're telling me is risky. And being able to back up your intuitions, your judgments, with real data that you can point to and say, "Hey, this is empirical." You know, we don't have to
Hmm.
we don't have to work on this maintenance activity right this second, but the data shows that we have a level of risk, right? That this
Yeah.
component that I'm telling you is on its last legs is used 50,000 places. So, like, we don't have to address it now, but if we want to be proactive about it and head off a problem before it becomes a problem, this is our level of exposure, this is our level of risk. And then engineers phrase who can phrase things in that way, can back up their arguments with evidence, I have observed to have a lot more success at getting things done within their organization, and being recognized for that, and seeing career advancement out of that, as being able to speak the language of your peers and management, and argue in terms that they find compelling, is a valuable skill.
Yeah. That's just another good reason to look into these types of analysis and then to present it in such a way.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we had another customer who I wish we had it set up to demo something like this ourselves. but it's set up automatic like breaking change detection on PRs using a third party, I believe, open source tool. Tim, you remembered the name of the tool the other day. Do you remember what it was?
Rev API, I think.
Yeah, Rev API. They use Rev API in their CI pipeline to detect when a pull request had a breaking change in it, and then use the results from Rev API to generate an open rewrite recipe. A parameterization of find types and find method usages. Those exact recipes that I just showed you to go figure out everywhere that would be broken by this PR, and then attach back a comment to the PR of like, hey, just a little heads up before you merge this. If you, when you do, you're going to break these 5 repositories in these 10 places. So, be forewarned, do with this information
Mhm.
what you will, but, well, you're not going to be able to claim ignorance if you go and break your colleague's code at this point, and they say, why did he break me? You can't say, I didn't know. So
Mhm.
everyone's a bit more accountable to each other and under such a system.
Yeah, it's very fun to see what folks do with the tools that we offer, and then build it into their pipeline and to make it work for them.
Yeah, and I love hearing about stuff like that. So if you do something cool with Open Rewrite, whether it's a massive refactoring or just answering an engineering question that you yourself had about your code base, if it's just the output is just like personal learning that you asked and answered a question about your code, come into the Open Rewrite community Slack or Discord and tell Tim and I about it. We would love to hear about that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing more fun than to hear folks that they're using the project and enjoying it and really making strides.
Yeah, love hearing about people's creative problem solving and augmenting my own skills and knowledge thereby. That's the fun thing about working on an open source project. One of the fun things
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Right.
So I think that's about all I have prepared for today. Anything else you wanted to talk about, Tim?
Um, we can point out that we showed all of this right now mostly through the Moderne platform, but you're also able to use it from your IDE. So if you haven't yet, then get the Moderne IntelliJ plugin and then Moderne CLI. And then you can do the same things on your local machine. See all the results that are your search hits stream into your IDE, such that if you want to have examples of what a particular usage of an API looks like across your entire organization, then you can pull this up directly and maybe copy and paste and move on to the next thing that you want to work on. So it's always very handy to have that ready.
Yeah, excellent point.
And then, yeah, apart from that, yeah, there's tons more recipes that you could run for analysis of maybe which Gradle versions you're using, which wrapper versions you're using of both Maven and Gradle. But it's,
Yeah,
I
finding the
think it's,
versions of various development tools that are in use across an organization is also a popular use case for this. As you've, the versions of Java you're using is going to be related to the versions of Gradle and Maven you're using, is going to be related to the version of Spring you're using. All of these things end up interconnected with each other, and so in trying to pull apart the tangle and make sense of it, they all end up being relevant at different times.
so yeah, then we've given you the links to all the recipes that we run, and do let us know how that works out for you. If you gain any insights that you immediately want to act upon, then do let us know.
Yeah. And actually, I did just run the same kind of search for list utils in my IDE via the Moderne plugin that I was running in the web interface earlier. So here in my IDE, I've installed the Moderne IDE plugin, of course, and you can go and look this up. Yeah, 070 is the current version. It's just in the IntelliJ plugin marketplace. You will need the Moderne CLI, but we can. I think we're still offering free signups for that, right, Tim?
Yep. All through the end
Yeah.
of the month.
Yeah. So you'll need the Moderne CLI for this, but that's not a problem. You can get it. And then, I just have the rewrite repository loaded up here. And just like before, just like I searched for this listutils.map function via the Moderne SaaS, here I could just go right click on the map method directly, say find usages in all repos. And now I have search results streaming in from all the open rewrite repositories, and you're probably already starting. The search is still running, locally on my machine right now, using pre-built LSTs that had downloaded for me from my CLI's connection to the Moderne SaaS, and I'm getting results both from the current repository, in this open rewrite repository that I have open, but also in downstream repositories that use this method, like rewrite logging frameworks. And so I get, results directly in my IDE and can indeed see code snippets from projects that I don't even have loaded up in the IDE currently, right? I just have the rewrite project open, but I'm doing this multi-repository search and getting answers about my doing this kind of impact analysis without ever even leaving my IDE, and without ever kind of leaving that flow state, that focus state of working on something.
Yeah, so it's I prefer it a lot over going to a different tool to do this types of search.
Right.
And where in the past I might have done like a quick search on GitHub. That of course is not type safe. So if you do a search for map, you're gonna find any kind of map and not just a list utils.map. So if this were a static import, you'd miss that one.
Right. Yeah. So it shows is more powerful than text-based search, since it's type aware and can tell the different. It's a million methods out there named map, and this will only find the ones that are actually this particular map function that I am interested in.
Yeah.
Now, I find myself doing a lot fewer GitHub code searches since working here on this stuff than I did before.
Yeah. So, good stuff. And hope you enjoy working with that as well. And then I think with that we'll wrap up. So thank you all for joining in. Someone else will be here next week. It's neither Sam nor me, but we'll let you know the details on what you can expect.
Yeah, we'll figure something out. Follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you'll get notified about what next week's topic is once we figure that out and who's going to be here.
And then hope to see you right after that. So thanks a lot, and see you soon. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.